everyone, it's Michael and Tash from Specific Property, and we're having our usual chat here about property. Today we're going back to our 4-part series about renting where you want to live and buying where you can afford. And in this specific video we're going to talk about what's the benefit of buying where you can actually afford to buy. Yeah. So Tash, I just want to introduce this by saying often people, as we've discussed previously, want to buy or live where they can't necessarily afford to buy.
Yeah.
And the benefit of buying somewhere where you can actually afford to buy is that, one, obviously you can buy something. I mean, that sounds...
say yes, check.
That sounds fairly ridiculous, and it's true. But secondly, we should be at all times buying properties that make sense.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you don't want to be buying in an area just because of the area's name or reputation. You want to be buying a property that can actually perform its core function, which is to be somebody's home. So there's no point, in my opinion, in buying we're in Middle Park today, so buying a 1-bedroom studio in Middle Park that you can't furnish properly. Just because it's a terrific area and you want to live here, or you want to be in the area, or own a property in the area, where the reality is that property doesn't really work. So you're much better off buying, say, a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom townhouse in an area that's further out of town, but is actually going to work as somebody's home. The reason for that is because if it's a really good property somewhere else, even if you're not necessarily going to live in it and you're going to rent it out as an investment, you're always going to typically have a tenant, and generally people will stay in properties that are good properties for longer, so you're not going to have a turnover of people. You'll achieve more than market rents, and you'll have a really strong and well-performing property. And hopefully that property also performs well in terms of its capital growth over time, which will then give you some equity to go and do another property, or potentially sell that and move into another area that you might want to live in at some stage.
Yeah, and I guess it's the idea as well of not stretching your budget too much. It's also about being able to enjoy life and do all the other things on the other side of that. So sometimes having that compromise of adjusting maybe the location of the property that you're looking at to be able to just live a little bit more comfortably, rather than paying a mortgage where you're stretching every time to make those repayments. So I think it's a interesting point, something to think about as well when you're starting to put your foot into the market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of really understanding the benefits of buying where you can afford.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we talk about buying where you can afford. Is ultimately the point of buying a property, other than security for you to live in, is to create wealth.
Yeah.
Right. So, and one thing that's going to certainly put a dampener on how much wealth you can create is if you've overstretched yourself and you're essentially a slave to a mortgage. It doesn't give you the capacity to pay that down. And one of the key elements about buying a property is you need to eventually pay the mortgage off.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a position where every week or every month all you're doing is covering the minimum repayment.
Yeah.
Whilst that's okay for certain periods in your life, well, maybe you're doing better and then you have a child, obviously, or you do something else and then there are additional expenses that come on. That's only a short period of time typically in most people's lives, but you don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you're in a certain stage of life and you know that your income's not going to really change that much, for example, or it's limited your ability, and then you're stuck in this kind of rut where all you're doing is making those minimal repayments. So it's really, really key to make sure that when you're buying a property that you're considering the overall effect that it's going to have on your life, as you say.
Yeah, because it's important to make sure that you're taking care of not just your financial stage or space or whatever it's called, but also taking care of your personal well-being.
It's only part of your life. It shouldn't be tied.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really important. We'll wrap that one up. These are just again short little videos, and we've just got one more topic to chat about in this series, which you'll get next week. Again, Tash and Michael from Specific Property. We're on all socials: LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And we'll talk to you soon.
See you
Thanks.
later.